to galacticconnection.com, one of the most popular blogs on the World Wide Web today for alternative news. Stay tuned for the latest information on our world shift from enslavement to galactic involvement, as well as current intel on any blockages impeding us from our sovereign birthright. Knowledge and self-mastery are key at this time. Our commitment is to present you with the latest breaking conspiratorial articles, off-world messages, exopolitics, cutting-edge technologies and sciences, and also an ever-significant intertwining of spiritual support and metaphysical scope that one needs to dive down the rabbit hole in search for truth with balance. We are truly on the horizon of a new golden age filled with the promise for more love, worldwide peace, and accelerated intuitive skills, where every living being can exist in cohesion and abundance. It is whatever we envision and dream this new world to be. I say to you now, let's redefine the new world to the beginnings of our own precious heaven on earth. Galactic Connection is here to provide the pulse of Mother Earth through an eclectic range of interviews each Tuesday afternoon from 3 to 4:55 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Station 2 on BBS Radio, expanding your perspectives on how we can once and for all take back our freedoms, our joy, and our connection with our mighty I Am presence. Our intention remains true to connect hearts and minds everywhere in order to obtain global unity and galactic and universal acceptance. Our discussions will continue to cover anything to do with galactic society and our involvement with our galactic brothers and sisters. Our guests are experts in their fields, and our radio shows have been coined as some of the most thought-provoking out there. In addition to our daily blog, which runs 365 days a year, we also offer a realm of healing services such as our world-renowned implant removal processes, our spiritual past life clearings, our galactic violet ray alchemy from Alexandra, who shares in the lineage of Merlin, and other cutting-edge healing technologies. Check our site out at galacticconnection.com now, sending you a wave of light, love, and inspiration, and a personal hug and thank you for listening to our Galactic Connection radio show and visiting our blog today. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alexandra Metters of galacticconnection.com, and today I am interviewing Kevin Annett. Many of you are very, very familiar with his work. Please visit his website at itccs.org, and you can get a lot of details as far as what his mission is, what he has been attempting to do, and the very strong commitment that he has to bringing an end to child sacrifice, satanic ritual, and pedophilia, especially within the church. Kevin was graced with the experience of stumbling upon information within the churches that led him down an incredible rabbit hole of very great personal loss, but also a great gain of wisdom and knowledge as to how this actual satanic network has penetrated every aspect of society. So today, we wanted to kind of go over some of the current events. There's so much going on. If you haven't been watching the alternative news in particular, you'll see how there are massive amounts of sting operations and satanic ritual rings that are getting busted, and there's been a lot of arrests going down. So we were going to go a little bit on about maybe discuss his take on that. This should be a very interesting conversation with Kevin because he has so much knowledge in this area. And the other thing that he's been very, very involved in is talking about common law. His latest radio show, if you haven't picked up on that, you've got two now, Kevin? Two radio shows?
Yeah, RadioFreeKanata, which is on Sundays at 3 o'clock Pacific time. And we just started one out of Scotland called Radio Free Anglia, which is kind of directed at people in the British Isles.
Other side of the world.
Very similar. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, one of the things that he's exploring is common law campaigns to expose and prosecute the Vatican and other churches that have succeeded and what lessons he has learned from that. So this is what he'll be covering in his next radio show. We can probably dive in a little bit on that today. I think right now what we want to do is cover some of the current headlines that are coming out regarding the Vatican and the Catholic Church in particular. Of course, remember, Kevin will remind you, whatever's happened in the Catholic Church is probably a reproduction of what's going on in many of the other major churches around the world. So, hi, Kev. How you doing? It's been a long time.
Hello. I'm fine. Yeah, too long.
I know, way too long. So, first of all, I guess Kevin is working on a new book. So let's go ahead and tackle that first. Tell us a little bit about this new book that you're working on.
It's book number 10, the fifth one I did this year. And
is that all?
2016, 27. Yeah, sorry, I should be more prolific, I know. But
more on it.
It's a common law training manual. It gives people the philosophy and the practice of what the common law is, how we can use it in our daily life to go after these criminals in high places and that. So that'll be coming out on over the next couple of weeks on Amazon.
That is so timely. And I can't imagine anybody that doesn't want, let me know about that one. I would love to definitely link.
I'll send you a copy.
Yeah, definitely link people up to that.
I'll send you a copy.
We've talked about it so much. So now you and I have not spoken in a really long time, and I just got deluged with a whole bunch of questions that I wanted to ask you recently, because there have been a plethora of arrests going down, and not only on this side of the pond, but also in Europe. And I want to know, through your lens, how do you feel that is affecting, like, the police forces, any of those types of facilities? How are they being impacted by all of these arrests?
Well, the way I look at it generally, it's got two prongs, and there's no doubt that because of the actions of people like in our network and around the world pushing on this issue for so many years, it finally reaches a critical mass, and the establishment knows that they have to react. We had an example of that in Canada, where after years of our exposure of these crimes of genocide against Native children, the government announces their, quote, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but of course it's set up to avoid any legal consequence for anybody. They talk around the issue a lot, but nobody ever really is punished for it. And there's a similar thing going on here. Yes, we hear about arrests, but don't forget, once people are arrested, they spend very little time in jail for crimes against children. The Canada alone, and the US is very similar, low rate of conviction or jail term for child rapists. Canada just lowered the mandatory prison term required for child rape from 3 to 1 year. So in fact, in Canada, it's more of a crime under the law to have a marijuana plant growing in your backyard than it is to rape a child. So yeah, sure, they're arrested. They'll be out within 6 months to a year and be doing it again. So it's not so much as the arrest as is it being stopped. And you'll notice in these reports about Pizzagate that there's no mention of the mafia, the Vatican, the CIA, the organizations that are very deeply involved in child trafficking for monetary reasons, for all, political blackmail purposes, all this stuff. You hear about the little fish, but you don't hear about the financial powers behind them that's really funding this whole human trafficking network around the world. HSBC Bank, JP Morgan, the financial interests along with the mafia that are really behind this. So, I don't think people should get too excited about this, because it's a reaction to what's been going on, but it's also a containment operation. So the people will think, oh, good, it's been resolved. We can go back to sleep now. It's not an issue anymore. They fixed that problem, right?
Well, at least it's a start, Kevin. It's a start. Come on, compared to not having it at all, at least first of all, it is accomplishing that which is more exposure to the mainstream. Anybody that's just not even at all. I mean, alternative media knows a great deal about it, but it's finally hitting some of the mainstream news networks that these big arrests are going on. And Ashton, what's Ashton's name?
Kirchner, whatever his name is.
Have you heard about him? He's really
Demi's boyfriend, yeah.
Yeah, Demi Moore. That's right. They used to be an item.
Yeah, well, it's not like I'm saying there's nothing good coming out of this because, like you say, for the first time the issue is out there. It's like when the residential school genocide hit the press. I just mean that we have to look beyond that reaction to say, okay, how can we, the citizens, we the people, make sure that this doesn't stop and that these people are actually put in jail or stopped so our children are protected. And that is in our hands. That doesn't require the police because we find that they just follow the lead of the people. And we have to keep that momentum going ourselves. That's, I guess, my general point.
So do you feel that with a lot of these raids that are actually even underground as we speak, there's quite a few of them that are going on, do you feel that that's affected some of the main power centers for child sacrifice? Because I've read a couple articles where they're getting a bit disoriented. Some of their main locations where they've had, child orgies and sacrifice and that kind of thing, they're being shut down. I'm just curious what you think about that.
Well, they're being moved. Definitely, we found that process. The first time that we were able to affect that in Vancouver, we identified the Vancouver Club as one of the spots Native children were being brought. Well, what we found is it stopped at the Vancouver Club and it was moved to yachts out in English Bay. The location of the child rape would just moved around. The same thing happened when we stopped a sacrificial ritual of the Ninth Circle in Montreal 2 years ago. From sources we had in the church, we knew that sent a shockwave through the Catholic Church because up to then they'd never been confronted. They hadn't even been named. The Ninth Circle cult had never been named until we did it. So definitely they go underground. It's harder. We definitely save lives. The information we gave to Interpol resulted in the arrest of over 1,000 people 2 years ago, and they literally released 30 or more children from cages in Brussels where these kids were being held. So it does save lives, and that's why we have to keep doing this all the time.
So I think your point is more not to lose the momentum, not to think, okay, wow, great, there's all these arrests going on, okay, we took care of that. There's still an underlying deeper issue here, which is you're dealing with a force that's so incredibly cunning in knowing how to hide their tracks and cover their butts,
And it's also a very old thing, Alexandra, like it goes back thousands of years, child sacrificial rituals, not just to Rome, but before that. It's deeply embedded in our culture, and don't forget, that's how elites tend to operate. You keep the population traumatized by abusing them as children, or by letting them think that their own children could be taken away from them at any point. It's one of the ways that people are kept in line. So it serves a political purpose. It isn't just some random sickos getting off on little kids. It's a weapon, just like genocide is a weapon of church and state. It's not some aberration. It's the norm, and that's just a funny little point on that. The other day, Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, came out again and pulled out his nice liberal banner and was saying how he supports the Standing Rock protest of Native people, which is a very odd thing for him to say, because here he is loving and applauding Junipero Serra, the mass murderer of California Indians, saying he's inspired by the man's zeal back in the 1700s. He doesn't revoke the Roman policies justifying the conquest of Native people. He doesn't return the land of Native people still held by the Vatican, but he's there applauding Standing Rock. It's kind of like, a typical politician speaking out of both sides of his mouth. And it's easy to do that, but you've got to look behind the rhetoric, right?
That's just crazy. Yeah, and I brought forth some cool headlines that I thought I would run by you and see what you thought about them. Now, apparently you've put together a warrant. I really thought you should definitely let everybody know about this. The warrant has universal jurisdiction and may be applied in any country, regardless of its statutory provisions. The police and judicial powers are required to assist in the execution of this warrant or refrain from interfering with its execution under the pain of being charged with obstructing justice and being an accessory to a crime. Wow.
Well, I found it interesting that we released that over the last, it was within the last month. And it was actually a reissuing of a warrant that we had first brought out when we convicted Ratzinger and the others back in 2013. But the fact, if you're a police agency and there's a citizen arrest warrant out there, and you've got friends who are child rapists, you want to move in there quick before somebody else can arrest them. I mean, this is one of the purpose of arrests is to protect people, actually. It's like when Catholic cardinals are, quote, reprimanded for molesting a child, they're sent away somewhere. They're pensioned off and protected under the guise of being reprimanded. The same thing, too, when police saw that there was a citizen arrest warrant in the hands of the people, they realized that they had to do it lest, you know, they lose control of the situation. And the elites higher up are begin to get arrested by the people. Now, they don't want that. So it's these empowering tools that we need to keep putting in people's hands, and it definitely evokes this kind of reaction by the authorities.
So tell us a little bit, I know you've had several radio shows about some of the success stories of people using these warrants and common law to be able to successfully shut down some things. Can you share some of the more recent feedback that you've received?
Well, we've had, for example, cases of people in Australia, in Canada, and in America, and England, all using warrants to go into churches, arresting not just known child-raping Catholic priests, but those who are protecting them. Because under even the citizen arrest laws in existence, not even under common law, but the statutes of different governments, under these citizen arrest laws, you have the right to detain somebody not only if you see them doing something wrong, but if you suspect they might harm somebody. Well, any Catholic priest in the world is suspect because under their own in-house policy called Crimen Solicitatis, they're obligated to protect child rapists within the church. Their brother priests, they're told by this papal edict going back to 1929 that the police are never to be told and the victims are to be silenced. So that's a criminal conspiracy. Now, any Catholic priest is part of that criminal conspiracy and they're suspect. So, I mean, the sky's the limit with these warrants. We can shut down, you know, social workers who we suspect are trafficking children, police who are complicit, judges. I mean, like you say, this thing is so widespread that this is a really potent weapon and people are beginning to act on it.
And the more of us that work together as a force, as a united force, the more quickly we can bring this down, right? And now I also know that you
That's the thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you and I have spoken in the past about they even have an entire network of orphanages, right? Where they just come in, they can take the children from there if they need children. Isn't that
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, from sources in America, it's clear that the orphanage system, especially those connected to the Catholic Church, are a hotbed for this kind of thing. Children usually go missing when they're being transferred from one either foster home or orphanage into another. Especially, you know, for example, one of the hot areas is in Arizona and the southwestern U.S. on some of the Anasazi and Navajo reservations. Literally, I mean, I've spoken to social workers there who tell me that every year dozens, sometimes 100 or 200 children just go missing and nobody ever sees them again. So on reservation Indians, children in war zones, poor kids, single mothers who are easily targeted, I mean, they're all prime, you know, for targets for harvesting children, for sure, you know.
That's terrible. God, we've got to stop this. So now you said that the warrant is valid for 1 year commencing January 25th. So this is relatively new. And it may be renewed by a judicial officer. Now there is a link that we will put up with this video so people can click on it, go straight to this warrant so that you can get going. If you feel like you're not stepping into your mission, maybe this is something that's burning within you, is to help the children of the world literally survive, let alone live a peaceful, normal, productive life. Right, Kev?
Right. Well, I mean, the thing people have to remember too is it's best not to act alone. When you get this warrant, it never do anything by yourself. Always have other witnesses there to film the event. You know, go in a group of 3 or 5 people, I found is a really good number. That way it doesn't look like you're ganging up, you know, and you're a mob. but it's enough people that you can be mutually supportive if push comes to shove. The police in these situations, they operate according to two things: the statute that they're trained under and their boss, their higher up. And what we find is in these situations, the police will not intervene if they know it's some kind of valid warrant. And these are valid warrants under the law, because they're involved in doing what the courts aren't willing to do normally, which is stop the perpetrator, or, on the ground where it's happening. I remember this classic statement made by a New York cop. He came to a public forum I gave in New York City, and he said, jurors in New York for decades, he was retiring. He's rare to have a child rapist convicted before he's committed the offense 5 or 6 times. And I said, so in other words, he can commit 1 or 2 or 3 offensive and he's never trained. He said, yeah, because the court knows that the chance of convicting him is low, and so they won't even go. So I said, you have to do it 5 or 10 times to even be convicted. That's how the present court system operates. Whereas our common law court says 1 offense and bang, you're a threat to the community, and that's it. And that's our power as citizens. We're not controlled by these, these elites who are running the courts in their own interests. And so I say, yeah, do it as a group. And also go to the police and tell them what you're doing. Educate them. Bring sheriffs in America have authority that very few police around the world have, in the sense that they're elected by the local community. They're not answerable to the government. And so bring your local sheriff into your training workshops. Show them the warrant. Get them on side. I mean, we find that works in America.
I feel that's a really good idea, because I saw footage the other day, Kevin, maybe you already got this, and it was 2 young girls that actually went onto the premises of a suspected child satanic ritual location. Looked like a big cathedral, or not a cathedral, a castle. And one of them went in, the other one got spooked. She took off, and the other one never came back. She just disappeared.
Yeah, well, that's why it's not good to do it by yourself.
Yeah, I'm bringing that up, everybody. But this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
Do it right if you're going to do it at all.
Yeah, and also when you said cathedral, that's accurate, because a lot of satanic rituals actually happen in basement or sub-basement areas in Catholic churches.
Jeez. So a couple of headlines have been coming out that I thought I'd run by you and see what you think about them. The first one, I just was curious. It says, after decades of work and hope and prayer, Pope Francis finally was the first pope to meet with the Russian Orthodox Patriarch. He and the Patriarch, his name is Kirill of Moscow, met briefly in Cuba in February and signed a joint declaration. Well, what's that all about?
Oh, well, Bergoglio is trying to engineer one world religion. He wants to get all the religions to get under the fold of Rome, right? When he talks about unity, it means join us. That's their notion of kind of ecumenical relations. In the same way, he's courting, like, this is the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, on October 31st. And he's wooing the Baptists, the Lutherans, the Anglican Church to all come back into the Roman fold, saying, oh, we've worked out all those problems. Well, none of the policies or doctrines of the Catholic Church have changed in 500 years, really. They still consider the Pope as an intermediary between God and man, not Christ, but the Pope. I mean, it's that old kind of Roman Empire thinking. And so it's not surprising he'd be meeting with the Orthodox leader, especially since, of course, that means Vladimir Putin. And the Vatican has always played both sides of the fence in the present power struggle between East and West, this kind of new Cold War. They're playing both sides. So that has political ramifications too.
Good point. That's interesting. Yeah, I just thought it says here in April, after visiting with refugees on the Greek island of Lesbos, which I thought that was an interesting word, Pope Francis, without prior announcement, brought 12 of them back to Rome with him. The Vatican is providing the funds needed for their living expenses, and the Rome-based Sant'Egidio community is helping them with language lessons and logistics. The 12 all had the legal paperwork necessary to move to Italy.
Well, isn't that nice?
I just thought...
But, no, I mean, it's part of... That's part of the spin operation, you know. We're so much better now.
They're doing a
Lesbos
lot.
Is...
They're doing a lot of that.
It's where we get the word lesbian from, by the way. Lesbos. It's named after the Greek poet Sappho. Yes.
Here's another interesting little tidbit. I just had to laugh. I brought it up to see what you have to say. Despite a very public battle wedged by locals and religious officials to keep the fast food chain of McDonald's out of the papal headquarters, a branch of the Golden Arches chain restaurant opened for business on Friday, feet away from the St. Peter's Square. The establishment will be open 6 days a week. And it goes on to say how it's a perverse decision, to say the least, by Cardinal Elio Segresia. What do you think?
I don't know why they consider it perverse. When you think of how much the Vatican Bank has invested in all these different, murderous corporations, including GMOs, Monsanto, the arms industry, like, why would they object to McDonald's? That doesn't make sense. Anyway.
Well, and the whole reason I brought this up, Kevin, is because you and I are very familiar with the fact that the Vatican has their own financial interests in a lot of different areas. McDonald's is known to be, right? They're one of the largest participants as a front door, at least that's what I've read, for child abductions.
Oh, that's a very important point. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm just getting over the flu, so my brain isn't working as well, but I should have picked up on that. The McDonald's is connected to, of course, Cargill, and one of the largest food processing company in America. And Cargill is closely linked with Satanic ritual networks. Cargill executives in Wayzata, Minnesota, like their headquarters is in Minneapolis, but they've been named in the media as operating rituals, is the way the media put it, at their corporate headquarters as part of their business. And the Ninth Circle cult within the Catholic Church, of course, as part of the ritual of killing children, is cannibalism, where after the child's throat is cut and they drink their blood, they eat the body. It's part of, like in the Catholic Mass where you eat the blood of Christ. Literally, they believe the communion wafer is the literal body and blood of Christ. It's not a big step to go from there to child sacrifice. It's really the same idea, that the innocent save us, the blood and the spirit of the innocent give us life. So anyway, they're all linked in, the food processing industry, satanic ritual killing. So that McDonald's presence at Vatican Square could be more than meets the eye. That's
what I'm thinking. And it's staring us right in the face. They're acting like they're upset about it. You and I both know it would never have gone down if they didn't really approve it. Seriously.
Of course.
Right? There's no unless they allowed it.
It's very strange because Italy, when you go there, you don't see any obese people, because there's no fast food industry in Italy. Like in France, they pride themselves culturally of having really beautiful food, and it is. The food in Italian restaurants is like fresh, made that same day, fresh vegetables from the countryside. It's so great food. Why the hell would they bring in a fast food chain? McDonald's has been reported of they've found human remains in their hamburgers. And that's part of the food processing industry, circulating human remains. It's part of the lowering of our frequency when we're eating one another, and that's part of the satanic ritual as well. So
it also corrupts our DNA. So that's where I was going to go next. Is people like Tori Smith have very much exposed that a lot of these children that are being sacrificed, they've had to find locations where to dump all of these bodies of whatever's left over. And they've now gotten so, I think the word is like belligerent. I don't know, smart alecky, and said, oh, you know what? We'll just put them in the fast food restaurants. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, I think that's going on for sure. Another reason people shouldn't go to those places.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially if they had any clue. Tell us a little bit about, it says here, there's a little bit of information out on George Pell. Remember when he was busted by the Australian police? We went over that last year, and he was busted for countless, claims of assault. Is there anything going on with that in Australia? Because the reason I ask that is because there's a lot of intel stating that the cabal and many of the higher officials have all moved and exodused to New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah, it's interesting because he was a cardinal, or still is, I think, and he was with the Ratzinger faction, kind of the old guard in Rome, and stood by Ratzinger even after the guy stepped down. And so, that's interesting, that bit about people going to Australia, because it's tied into these factional struggles going on in Rome. I mean, there's an old element around Ratzinger, kind of represented by the old Roman cardinals, and Pell is with that faction, that believe in the old Western alliance. They're very much kind of Euro-America centered. And Bergoglio is more, we call him like a transnational pope. He's kind of trying to get in all camps. He's working with the BRICS alliance. He's working with Russia. He's posing as the kind of globalist, right? He talked about that when he was at the UN, Agenda 2030, he called it. I mean, he's openly talking about, when you look at Agenda 2030 and Agenda 21, its predecessor, it's about global depopulation. The word sustainability is the code word for depopulating the planet. So it's like you say, the masks are coming off very quickly. And I think this thing about Pell is just an indication of, that there's different strategies on the part of these elites of how they go about keeping control. And, there certainly isn't a uniform, homogeneous block of rulers running things. I think there's factions that work, definitely.
Yeah, the other intel that's been coming out is that all the stories regarding Antarctica and the fact that there's a full-blown civilization that's been discovered down there, which in my opinion was discovered a long time ago. It was just covered up, and there's been a lot of talk about how the dark have been planning on using means and stargates as an ability to escape. Okay, like this is like their exit plan is Antarctica, because they put a lot of work into it, which is another reason they're moving down to New Zealand and Australia, because there's underground tunnels under the ocean floor where they can reach, Antarctica. So I thought, just interesting that someone so major, I mean, because apparently George Pell was a finance chief, right, for the Vatican, right? He oversaw the...
Oh, yeah. That's why you see, Ratzinger, one of the reasons he stepped down wasn't just because of our work in exposing him, protecting child rapists and traffickers in the church. He was very close to negotiating a lot of the transfer of Vatican money to Deutsche Bank, to keep it out of the hands of the BRICS alliance, because Bergoglio is doing the opposite. He's trying to link the bank with BRICS, and that failed. And so Pell was part of that. So I think when you find people exposed as child rapists, and that sometimes it's because one faction wants to screw the other, so they go after their guy. Like, remember the Pope who was killed in 1978, John Paul I? Yeah. He was poisoned after 28 days in office because he had ordered an investigation into the Vatican Bank.
Right.
And the reality was he wasn't just the sterling character, the good guy who was killed by the bad guys. He represented a faction around the Banco Ambrosio, which is the Bank of Milan, which was his diocese before he became Pope. And he represented that banking interest wanting to get control out of the hands of they were called the P2, Masonic Lodge that was running the Vatican Bank at the time. This is all in a book called In God's Name by David Yallop about the murder of John Paul I. Well, one banking cartel knocked off the other banking cartel's Pope and put in their guy, the Polish guy, John Paul II. Because he had brought in CIA money for the first time. I mean, like there was a whole history there. It's like in the Borgias and the Medicis in the Middle Ages fighting each other, putting their pope in. It's no different now, except it's big finance, big banks.
How many factions do you think are within the Vatican themselves?
Well, I'd say, there's two major ones around Bergoglio and Ratzinger, their forces. But then there's a third, which doesn't really have a figurehead attached to it. But we get information from this third faction. And they're the ones who released, for example, there was a Vatican librarian who released a copy of that Crimen Solicitanus to the London Observer back in 2004, which showed the policy of protecting in-house child rape. Also, they released the document describing the Ninth Circle cult operating as far back as the early 1700s and being linked to the Jesuits. And so this third faction represents that kind of unaligned group of insiders in the Vatican who are maybe trying to do the right thing. They know their life is in their hands if they do these things. The kind of I don't know who or what that represents, but they're certainly out there because we hear from them. Mm-hmm. Whereas we don't hear from the fact that the two solid factions, those are really quite controlled.
That's crazy. Go back to the Criminalis Solicitanus. Tell everyone again.
It's a hard word to pronounce.
Yeah, tell everyone again what that states. Because to me, once you learn this, there's no going back.
Well, if you can see it online. It's also in our book, Murder by Decree, murderbydecree.com. It's in one of the appendices. It means that the crime of solicitation, that's the policy coming out of the pontiff's office, that's the top guy there, saying what is to happen when children are harmed in the Catholic Church. And in its paragraph 7 and 11 are very key because they say, essentially, when a crime like that happens, it's not a crime, it's a sin. So a sin can be forgiven. The crime is to talk about it, and that can put you in prison. Talk about the offense. Because what is done is when a child is harmed, the perpetrator and the victim are silenced. The police are not to be told. And
we're getting interference. Isn't that interesting? So the public
on pain of excommunication.
Sorry, Kevin, you went out. We're having interference. So you said the public are not to be told.
Gee, that's a surprise.
I know.
The police are not to be told. No one is to be told. And if anyone is told, the one who did it is excommunicated. Now, to a Catholic, when you're excommunicated, you're thrown into hell. You have no chance. Your soul has no chance for redemption. So in other words, they're saying God doesn't like a snitch. God wants you to protect child rapists and not help the child. That's the logic of their policy. That policy has never been revoked. In fact, even like the present Pope Francis stood by the policy. He says to the media, we have zero tolerance policy about child rape, but then to the Italian bishops he says, you're not to tell the police, you're to stand by this criminal policy when children are raped. Now, that's a criminal conspiracy right there. And why they're allowed to do that, every government in the world and police is colluding in them in the right to rape children and protect the perpetrators within their corporation.
Kevin, has anyone actually put the Criminalis Solicitanus, or whatever, however you say it, Solicitanus, has anyone ever just put that out there and deluged the internet with that policy? And I mean, for people to be able to see that in black and white, I think would just be a game changer around the world.
We do all the time. It's been out there. To tell you the truth, we don't get a lot of response because
Amazing.
I think two things. Child abuse is not an issue that a lot of people get politically involved about. I mean, they'll protest about all sorts of stuff, but not about child abuse. Secondly, they're afraid of taking on the church. Even if you're an atheist, you find people kind of holding back. It's the brainwashing that's being done to us at a young age, right? That they somehow have something to do with God and they have power over your life if you take them on. That's very ingrained. And so I think that's part of it, the explanation. But we've not only, put it out there so people can read about it, we've actually taken copies in. And I remember once in Amsterdam, a bunch of us went in a few years ago, and we knocked on the door of the Archbishop there, and we handed him the policy. We filmed him at the same time. And we said, you made a statement the other day that you have a zero tolerance policy towards child rape. So does that mean you're revoking this policy in the Vatican? Because it says here, you're to protect child rapists, and yet you're saying you won't. So which is it? And he wouldn't talk to us.
Wow.
He just stayed silent because they know they're lying. They're speaking out like the Pope, speaking out of both sides of their mouth. They have a standing policy of you can rape a child and get away with it. So who's that going to attract? If you're a child rapist and you want to get away with it, you want to get ordained as a Catholic priest because that's ensured that you'll be able to do that. That's when they say, oh, only 7% rape children or 15% or whatever it is. No, 100% do. Because when you protect a criminal, you're committing a crime too under the law. It's called being an accessory, right?
Yep.
Right up to the Pope.
Yeah, in fact, let me see, where is that? We were going to go over that. There was a headline that, here it is. There was a headline that states that 7% of Australian Catholic priests are accused of abuse. Now, the thing that I thought was so funny was it says these numbers are shocking, they are tragic, and they are indefensible. It came from a tearful Mr. Sullivan told the commission. As Catholics, we hang our heads in shame. Francis Sullivan, CEO of the Truth, Justice, and Healing Council. I was wondering, well, who's that? Yeah. Okay.
It sounds like the church.
And it said these statistics were released from a hearing of an Australia's Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse. Okay? That's a mouthful. But apparently, there's at least some heat going on, Kevin, where they're trying their best to scramble and try to act like they're really wanting to work with the law and the people and really wanting to get down to it. I just cracked up when I saw only 7%.
Well, I often wonder, well, how do they do a count on that, right? Are they watching everyone all the time and saying, oh, it's only 7%? These are just numbers they pull out as part of their PR campaign. They just make up. It's kind of like in Ireland, as in Canada, when this stuff first began to come out, the churches and government get together, they indemnify themselves legally. So they say, okay, we'll cooperate in an investigation as long as we're never charged with anything and we bear no legal liability. Mm-hmm. They say, fine. And at that point, they can say whatever they want because they know none of them will ever go to court or to jail. Same thing happened in Canada here with the genocide. Nobody's ever gone to jail for killing over 60,000 children. It was arranged that way. So, it's kind of like when in an abusive family, the father sets the terms of apology. If the father is the rapist and he sits down and says to everyone, we're all going to be reconciled now, but just don't challenge my authority. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to carry on, right? It's the same thing here. You can't let the perpetrators conduct an investigation of themselves and set the terms of reparation or justice.
Such a good point. And it says here, commissioners surveyed Catholic Church authorities and found that between the years of 1980 and 2015, get the number, Kevin, 4,444 people were reported that they had been abused at more than 1,000 Catholic institutions across Australia. Okay,
well, don't forget about the percentage of people who report in rapes is usually less than 10%. In other words, over 90% of people never report. So you can multiply that by 10 right there, even if you go by their figures. And also within the climate of the Catholic Church, you're told that if you if you go up against a, quote, man of God, you're going up against God. Most people are so brainwashed, they'll never report it. So that figure, if it's 4,700 or whatever who report, it's a huge number.
44, 40, 44, 44. Which
yeah, so I mean, you're really probably talking 10, 15 times that, even by their stats, which I don't trust.
Yeah. Anyway, if you want to check out this link, it's Associated Press. It was released February 6th. We'll go ahead and put links on the video so you guys can read up what's going on with the latest. So here's another one. Okay, it says Cardinal Burke presides over trial investigating Guam Archbishop. Cardinal Raymond Burke, a church law expert and former head of the Vatican's highest court, arrived in Guam February 15th as the presiding judge in the church trial investigating allegations of sexual abuse leveled against Archbishop Anthony, Apuron of Agana. Cardinal Burke is pictured in a photo, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and it just says the Vatican press office confirmed a tribunal of first instance. Now, what the heck is a tribunal of the first instance?
Well, it's a fancy word for saying it's an in-house inquiry. What would we think if the mafia in New York City announced, the 5 families of the mafia announced, we're going to conduct a tribunal, an investigation into the alleged disappearance of people at our hands. We're going to do a investigation into our crimes. Like, people would laugh at that, and yet the Catholic Church does it, and it's somehow legitimate. When in fact they're a more murderous organization than the mafia ever was. The ties are very close, of course, but why do they have even the right to do this? They should be under arrest. There should be civil law coming in and putting these people on trial. Why aren't the police investigating? Why do they hand over authority for the rapists and robes to investigate themselves? I mean, it's absurd, you know?
And even if they appear that they're separate, there should be a full-blown investigation as far as the background of the individuals that are participating, because they're just so far-reaching in every aspect of society. Yeah. It just blows my mind. What were you going to say?
Well, there's no rule of law in the church, of course. And I experienced that when I got thrown out of the church and my life ruined by them, by the United Church. Protestant Catholic, it's the same system, and it goes back 1,000 years or more in Europe, when the church and the king each had their own little sphere of influence, and the king allowed the church all sorts of autonomy. For example, if a priest murdered somebody, he'd be tried in a church court, not in the king's court. And so, you know, there's that historical reason for this stuff, but the reality is that churches are a law unto themselves. They can do anything under the people under their control, whether it be their employees, children, whoever, native kids. They can do whatever you want to them, including kill them, and they're subject only to their own statutes. They're not subject to a higher law, the law of the land, the law of God, anybody. You can murder and get away with it in these churches. And so people keep wondering, well, how come there's so much child abuse? Well, it's a protected organization where crime is sanctioned. So, you know, for them to then investigate themselves, and what are they going to do to the perpetrator anyway? They slap them on the wrist. They send them off to, you know, pension them off somewhere. They never punish their own in-house child rapists. So I don't know what people expect, really.
Wow, that's crazy. According to this article, which is in the Catholic News Service, by the way, it says the men have publicly accused Archbishop Apuron of sexually abusing them when they were altar boys in the 1970s. So I would imagine there's quite a few of those coming forward, because I remember talking to you before where you had quite a few older men in their adult years coming forward now willing to testify. Remember, we talked about that a long time ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll notice it's 40 years ago, right? They never will bring a case where it's like 6 months ago, because it's ongoing. It's implicating people now. So you let things sit for years, decades, and then hopefully the people either die off, the evidence is buried, corroborating eyewitnesses are disappeared somewhere, and they can't really bring a case. So The only cases I'll ever bring out are those cases very old that don't have the chance of any kind of repercussion, right? If somebody now going to jail, one exception to that is in 2014, right when we were prosecuting in our second common law court case, we're prosecuting Pope Francis and the others for the Ninth Circle child trafficking. It came up that Sean Brady, the Cardinal of Ireland, was involved in covering up, do you remember the cistern they found where there the remains of 800 babies?
I remember that.
And we found out, yeah, in Tuam on the west coast of Ireland, we found out from sources in the police that some of those skeletons were missing their heads. They'd been decapitated. So a sign of satanic ritual killing. Cardinal Sean Brady, I'm on a radio show in Galway talking about this. Sean Brady has just been in the press denying it ever happened. And it turned out we had from a witness that Sean Brady himself was involved in that place. He was probably personally implicated in those deaths. Next day he resigns, just steps down without explanation, right? So obviously we had caught him in that, and because we announced it over there in that, he felt he had to step down. So these things we do have an impact, but if you're a powerful individual, you don't want it to seem like you've done that in response to anything we have done. So it's always cloaked in a lot of fog, and so people don't see the connection that, yes, we can have an impact, right?
Well, and I'm wondering, where did he end up? Who's he working for now? What role is he playing within the Satanic network? If you're saying
the same he always...
You know what I mean? You're saying that their modus operendi is just to kind of shift positions around. If it gets too hot, they'll move them over here. Didn't you say
absolutely?
Wasn't there something in writing about that's just a normal automatic thing? If they're caught, they will be moved to another diocese?
Yeah, within Crimen Solicitatis and a lot of other church statutes I've read, it's standard policy that to them, you see, raping a child is not a crime in their mind. There's nothing wrong. As a matter of fact, there was this classic statement made by William Lynn. Do you remember the first bishop in American history ever to go on trial in Philadelphia for protecting? He was just enforcing Crimen Solicitatis policy and protecting all the Philadelphia diocese priests who were raping kids. So he goes to trial, and he actually said on the witness stand, I didn't think it was a crime for a child to be raped. He was pleading ignorance. He said, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. I mean, that's how these guys think, okay, that, for whatever twisted reason, they don't see that as a problem. But what the problem is to talk about it, because all that matters is the reputation and the money of the church. That's sacrosanct, not human life. So it's hard for people to get their mind around that's what we're dealing with, people like that. So they're not troubled. I mean, there's never any heartfelt remorse for any of these people for that. It's just all words, right?
Like window dressings. Here, just I had to add this to see what your comment is on this. It says, at a news briefing on February 10th, according to the Pacific Daily News, Archbishop Burns announced that Archdiocese would adopt the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Charter for the protection of children and young people. Okay? And it says, accusations of clerical sexual abuse involving minors automatically would be reported to civil authorities. You heard anything about that?
Yeah, but again, that doesn't trump the standing Vatican policy. They're not going to go against church policy. They can say whatever they want, but they're bound by Crimen Solicitatis, which means no, they will not report it. And what you need to do to solve this problem is you've got to secularize the church. You've got to place it under the law of the land. Priests should be licensed as public servants, so if they harm a child, boom, they lose their license to practice. Bang. They're answerable to the law, not to a bishop, not to a pope. You've got to destroy the independent power of the Vatican, because that's where a lot of this is coming from, right? You've got to nullify their tax-exempt status under the law, because you know how much money American taxpayers are giving to the Vatican every year to do these crimes? It isn't just indirectly. Well, under the tax in 2013, the U.S. Catholic churches brought in about $140 billion in revenue, if you can believe it. Just in America alone, 140 billion, okay? Less than half of 1% of that went to charity.
What?
So where did 99.5% of the money go? And they admit that. It's the only country in the world where the church is audited and forced to show where they spent their money. Half of 1% for charity. It's window dressing, a thin little window dressing. The rest, we know where it goes, to the hands of the mafia, into all sorts of corporate investments in every crooked thing in the world. Even online porn. The Vatican has investment in 2 online porn companies that we've identified, funded by the Vatican Bank. So that's where the money is going. Now, American taxpayers are subsidizing that all the time, and they're giving money directly to Rome through what's called a financial concordat, which is a treaty between America and the Vatican that actually channels public revenue into the Vatican coffers. There's 100 countries or more in the world that have these financial concordats with Rome. I mean, people don't even know that.
It's like there is no separation from church and state. Like we were taught in history, in our school years. There's no separation whatsoever.
Not in practice. I mean, it's a nice idea. It's like democracy, right? Or Christianity. Yeah. It's a nice idea, but what actually happens,
That's crazy. Well, here's another one. Top down turned around. Child protection goes global from the ground up. Jesuit Father Hans Zollner, president of the Center for Child Protection, speaks in early February at a Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome during a news conference officially launching the Center for Child Protection in Rome. Now, it says here, some parts of the world see swift attention paid to victims of sexual abuse. Others are still experiencing delays or mishandlings of allegations. Jesuit Father Hans Zollner is spearheading a complimentary, I thought you'd get a kick out of this, course, a global alliance built and grown from the ground up by individual priests, religious, and laity, along with Catholic universities, religious orders, and bishops' conferences.
It's mostly for the people in the pews to make them think that things are fixed so they don't stop giving money.
Oh, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, it's, now this is, listen to this. The center offers a specialized e-learning program, and an on-site diploma course in safeguarding minors. I just was like, oh my God. What makes the program's graduates unique is they then use their new skills and local knowledge to train and educate others back home on a local, diocesan, and even national level. So they're even going so far as creating it into an e-course, which if you don't know what that means, they're creating like a, you can basically take the course online on the internet via email and links off the internet. I was blown away.
Well, I don't want to stretch the analogy too thin, but back in the 1970s, when all the revelations of the mafia began to hit the press for the first time, one of the mafia families, I forget which one in New York, announced the formation of the Italian Anti-Defamation League, because they were saying any talk of the mafia is just a way to attack Italian Americans, right? And so they got on a big human rights. The mafia was actually funding human rights campaigns in New York City, right? And under the guise of wanting to improve this bad image the mafia had. I mean, and it was just laughed at, of course. But the Catholic Church can get away with it because they got a little cross hanging over them, and people think that has something to do with God. And you talk to your average Catholic, and they're far gone. They're beyond any attempt to reach with reason or compassion or anything. That's it's just wired into people so deep. In a way, I'm always curious why the church does this song and dance to try to bend over backward to make themselves look good when they don't really have to, because they should be honest, use Machiavelli's advice and be honest, realpolitik, and say, yeah, we rape children. We operate child trafficking. We can do whatever we want because we think we're God. We don't think human life has any intrinsic value unless you're in our club. Why don't they just be honest and admit that? What happens in practice all the time, but there's incredible doublethink goes on when it involves religion.
Yeah, and then you also have to think to yourself, how many of them even have a conscience at all? Like you were saying, they don't really think they're doing anything wrong. So
no. So how can you then set up all these programs to help children when that's not a crime? Like it doesn't even make any sense, and it's just silly.
The thing is too, if you're involved in this type of activity, it is clear that you are not driving your own ship. Okay, you've got some sort of satanic attachment, being, demonic spirit, archontic spirit that is running that physical vessel, and they don't have that. Their modus operandi is they don't have a conscience. Right? I mean, you see that a lot.
Well, Jesus called Satan the father of lies, and the modus operandi is the lie. They have to lie to themselves and each other all the time that there's something that they're not, that they're really of the light. When we see by their fruits we know them, right?
Well, and you mentioned something before that I think is really pertinent. It does seem, with some of the information coming out, a lot of the leaking of data and information coming out, it does seem that there is an Illuminati faction that has been within the Vatican that is attempting to get some of this information out. Do you agree with that? I mean, there sure is a lot. There's been stuff coming out lately.
Well, people should read The Prince by Machiavelli, because he wrote that in the 1400s for Cesare Borgia and the Borgia popes. It was advice to how you run things as a ruler. And part of his advice was you always have to appear to be doing the right thing. You always have to, as a ruler, you have to have religion and the church on your side, because no matter what you do, it will then be legitimate and sanctioned, even if you're killing people. And that's, especially the Jesuits, they're masters of realpolitik. And this present Jesuit Pope, he's just leading the world around by their nose by saying the things that people need to hear. And that's what you do. What people need right now is a sense that the system is improving, that it's reforming itself. Because don't forget, very few of us have that sense of self-governance, spiritual or social self-governance, where we say we are our own creation. We have the power of the universe within inside each one of us, and we can make these changes, right, ourselves. We don't have to wait for some authority figure to do it for us. Yeah. Well, because most people don't have that, they're always looking for somebody in the system to save them. A reformer, a reforming element within the institution, and that's not all those elements. When you talk about the Illuminati releasing information, that's one faction releasing information that will be a benefit to them in gaining a position against the other faction. It's not that they want reform or improvement, or that's our projection onto them. They're doing what we think is the right thing, but they're just jockeying for a position using, to embarrass the other side with information, and that's the world in which they operate, and morality has nothing to do with it.
So it's like power plays, right? It's power plays for who can
totally
be at the top. It's almost like
absolutely
the drug cartels and who's going to be at the top. I did want you to know, it says the center also will host a congress, now get this, on minors and online abuse entitled Child Dignity in the Digital World. This will occur October 3rd through the 6th. 2017. Father Zollner said he met with Pope Francis December 21st to tell him about the Congress and get his approval and support. The Pope was moved and shaken by estimates.
Oh, yes.
The priest provided that in India alone, get this, it is expected 500 million more people will go online next year, and at least half of them will be minors, exposing them to all kinds of risks we can hardly imagine. The organizers are inviting software companies, representatives from government and law enforcement, science experts, and policymakers to share ideas on protecting minors from abuse online, including looking at how young people abuse the internet and each other, for example, through sextortion or extorting others with their sexual information or images. Oh,
well, I wonder if that means that the Vatican is going to relinquish their shares in the online internet porn companies that they own. Just somebody should ask Francis that.
Yeah, it's almost like if you read this stuff and you read between the lines, you'll actually see what they're really moving forward on.
Well, yeah, and don't forget too that when that group in America, Child Find, it's actually it's supposed to be monitoring child trafficking and abduction of kids and disappearances and that. And it does some of that, but what people don't realize is it's set up by the CIA because they use front organizations to monitor what's really going on out there, and anything that might jeopardize the perpetrators is spotted and nipped in the bud before it can develop into anything. So when these, the Vatican is setting up this stuff so as to monitor who's doing what and stop anything that might, get close to that cardinal who might be exposed. I mean, they need intel all the time about who's doing what. So they operate through these apparently benevolent organizations to do that. And it's kind of like you got to know the nature of what you're dealing with to see behind the rhetoric and the gestures, right?
I think that's the most difficult part because you have really good intentioned people, not really capable of mm-hmm. What am I trying to say, Kevin?
Well, they're part of something they don't know what they're part of, and they are in a small little way doing something good, but it's part of something bigger that isn't good. And
I don't even know if they can wrap their brain around the sinisterness of this. Do you know what I mean? I just...
Yeah, I do, and I don't think that's anything new in history. I think that's always gone on. But I think we're at a point where people are beginning to wake up to the bigger reality.
Oh, yeah.
And say, no, we don't want to be part of it, right?
I totally agree. Now, this one is the hottest news, and I've been so curious what your take is on it. This is by The Telegraph. It says, Vatican mole left secret messages hidden in confession box in Renaissance church in Rome. Basically, they convicted this woman. She was basically, secure notes hidden in a confession box were fed information about Vatican intrigue to a woman who was convicted of leaking confidential information about the Holy See, which is a new book she has revealed. She was then convicted by a Vatican court. Notice they said Vatican last year, and sentenced to 10 months in jail in what was dubbed the Vati Leaks 2 trial. What do you think about it? What's that all about?
Well, Vati Leaks 1 was about Paulo Gabriel. He was the Pope's butler.
That's right.
Now, he leaked some stuff about the journal entries of the Pope. I think this was Ratzinger, not Bergoglio. But people don't even ask, the Vatican have their own prisons? How can you put somebody in a private church prison and they don't have any appeal to a normal court? That you'd think that would start raising some questions, right? But no, this is information control. It's like the reality is that the church can imprison anybody they like, hold them in their own private prisons, try them in secret courts. They're a power unto themselves, and when something like this happens, it's more proof of that. So we probably won't see a lot of that information they had. Does it say anything about what she had, or?
Let me see. In her book, In the Name of Peter, the 35-year-old public relations executive reveals for the first time that she had a mole in the Vatican's powerful Secretariat of State. He kept her abreast of what was going on there by leaving secret notes in a confessional in a 16th century San Luigi de Franceschi, church, which is famous for Caravaggio paintings that were hanging on the wall. Let me see. it's not really answering your question. She describes the trepidation and fear she felt every time she entered the church to pick up the messages. Okay, we already know about that. Okay. Let me see. The message, here we go. The messages of my friend in the Secretariat of State left in the confessional to keep me abreast of what was happening kept me going during these months. One of the messages she received claimed that the Pope was angry that the trial had gone ahead and wanted it brought to a close as soon as possible. This trial has to finish. His Holiness is really irritated. Another secret communication informed her that her house was about to be searched by Italian police, while a third one told her that one of her co-accused Spanish Monsignor Angel Lucio Vallejo Balda had tried to commit suicide. You know anything about that?
No, I hadn't heard about that, but no, Josie, they don't. So much of what you can see about their nature is in their reactions. As soon as any information that's unauthorized starts coming out, their liberal mask falls, and boom, they say, you know, hammer these people. That's the action of guilty people. They don't want information to come up, the dark secrets that would be revealed in so doing, right?
Well, and apparently they did a whole smear campaign on her and said she was having an affair, and, you know, that she claimed to show up in some sexy nightgown and blah, blah, blah. You know, that was their response to it. The reason I brought this up, though, is because more and more people are trying to get the information out in their own little way, whoever that mole was. But the part that hit me the hardest, Kevin, is they claimed that she was in prison for 10 months. And can you imagine what they put her through to get the name of this?
Well, no one knows. No one knows. They can do whatever they want to people. We don't know what conditions are like in a Vatican prison. Like, it's unbelievable that people allow in the present day that kind of thing to go on. But, you know, they have this arrangement with the Italian government that they're a power unto themselves. And
do you remember that nun? God, what was her name? She's like one of the only ones that successfully made it out, and she outed her whole experience of going through the nunnery. Do you remember this? And then she disappeared.
Yep.
They never found her again, of course. And she knew that was the last time she was ever going to probably talk. But one of the things she explicitly gave details in is what they do to the young virgins that are going into the nunnery, and how they take them downstairs into the basement and they chain them to the wall. She said it was like very 1500s kind of, you know, they chain them up against a wall, and then they starve them for 3 days until they approve and agree for the priest to have sex with them. Did you hear about this? And if you guys,
oh yeah, well, I've heard
it's an amazing video. I don't even know if it's still up there. They probably took it down, but
probably not.
She actually went out on a video and gave this information in detail as to what she was done and how they indoctrinate even these poor little, you know, young girls who don't even know any better. And then she goes into this whole thing about how they get them pregnant and then they take their children. And depending on how upset they are with them, they'll either sacrifice them right in front of the mother, or they'll use them for.
Well, it's similar to we talked earlier about child trafficking, and one of the simple ways it's done in Catholic care homes is if you're a young girl and you get pregnant, and this can happen anywhere. Hannah Anderson, a woman in Vancouver, told me this. This happened to her in the 1990s. She was 16. She got pregnant. Her mother calls up the priest. The priest said, "Oh, well, you have to have your baby in one of our special homes." So they move her into this home where she's isolated with all these other pregnant girls. They put them on a special drug program, like on a drug protocol. It's actually, they got an agreement with hospitals. It's called the BFA protocol, Baby for Adoption. So what they're targeting babies to be trafficked even when they're in the womb. They brainwash the young women to think that they're not going to be a good mother. They had to sit there and watch videos, pro-life videos, which in fact was saying, you know, the church can raise your child better than you can. We'll find good homes for them. They went through that. They would starve them. They would beat them. And this was all happening right under the nose. The families knew about it. The priest had arranged it. The woman doctor treating her was a member of the parish, Holy Rosary Cathedral, which is the one we occupied, by the way. And they finally have the baby. She's not allowed to touch the baby. It vanishes. She also never knew what happened to her baby. Could have been sacrificed, could have been trafficked for money. This is going on as we speak, and millions of children are trafficked through the Catholic Church that way for lots of money. So for them to be talking about, oh, we're going to have these programs to get to the root of child abuse and all that, it's like right alongside this huge baby trafficking industry. And it sounds like similar to what you're saying, to how the nuns are chained and beaten and forced to have sex. It's like, that's the beast. That's the nature of that institution, right?
Oh my God, incredible. Now, here's another one that's really hot. I'm really curious what you think about this. It says, Knights of Malta head has agreed to resign after a dispute with Vatican. Do you know anything about this? This has gotten quite a bit of coverage, by the way. This is dated January.
The Knights of Malta, did you say? Sorry.
Mm-hmm. And it's the head of the Knights of Malta, who has been locked in a bitter dispute with the Vatican, has resigned. And it says the spokesman and Grand Master Matthew Festing had resigned after Pope Francis asked him to step down at a meeting on Tuesday, which it says usually keeps their positions for life. So this is very strange that this is being done.
We do know that when Bergoglio came in, he did a big house cleaning of the Ratzinger faction and the pro-Western factions among the cardinals. Because, like I say, he's got this globalist strategy of getting the Russian Orthodox Church and everybody together under the one world government, one world church, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure it has something to do with that. Maybe this Knights of Malta head was part of the old Ratzinger gang. I mean, they always can come up with an excuse to force people out. So I would guess it has something to do with that broader politics going on in the Vatican right now.
It says here he was sacked in December in a chivalric equivalent of a boardroom showdown, ostensibly because, get this, he allowed the use of condoms in a medical project for the poor.
Well, you can't use condoms, my God.
And it says here, Mr. I know, it's one less child for them to be able to manipulate and control. Mr. Festing had denounced the papal commission as intervention in the order's sovereign affairs, accusing members having a conflict of interest and defiantly set up his own internal commission. So it's kind of like what you said, right? It's like that's kind of like another faction, right? Of the Vatican is Malta.
It's all about faction fights, and that's the thing people have to understand. So
wow.
I think that's more of the same.
Let me see. The all-male top leaders of the Knights of Malta are not clerics, but they do take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience to the Pope. The institution has 13,500 members, 25,000 employees, and 80,000 volunteers. The order, formed in the 11th century. Well, Kevin, what happened in the 11th century, Kevin? Come on.
First Crusades, for one thing. Cathars, First Crusades.
To provide protection and medical care for pilgrims to the Holy Land, has the status of a sovereign.
Knights Templar.
Knights Templar, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, well, it came around at the same time as the Templars, but don't forget today that Knights of Malta, every director of the CIA, a lot of presidents, even Nelson Mandela, I mean, all these guys, they're all Knights of Malta. It's a very kind of the one faction of the global elites. They're all part of this.
Kind of like the Club of Rome, right?
Yep.
Jeez. Yep. I only have two more that I love talking to you about. Now, there was another article, actually, it says that Festing is defending his actions and saying that he's extremely tired of the conflict. So do you think this is a stage performance, or do you think that there's actually some trouble between these two factions? I'm just curious. What do you...
Could be either. Could be both. I mean, like, it's hard to say from the outside. But, don't forget, like, my old kind of operating rule is that you don't, anything you're being allowed to see is serving somebody's interest. And it's creating Yeah, I think it boils down to that whole thing all the time of, well, ask whose interest does it serve for this to come out right now? Who has the power to bring it out? I mean, why would they report it if it was going to really hurt the Vatican in some way? Like, simple common sense.
Yeah, okay, and then here's the last one. This is on Vatican.com. It says Pope lauds courageous witness of abuse victim who forgave. Now, this is the kind of PR spin that they do. It says, for those who have been victims of a pedophile, it is difficult to talk about that they have been through and describe the trauma that will persist after many years. It's a 240-page book titled I Forgive You, Father, Surviving a Broken Childhood. This guy shares the story of his difficult childhood during which he and his siblings were shuffled around from foster home to foster home, just like you said, Kevin, after their parents' separation before eventually meeting the friar who would abuse him. And at the age of 9, he was lured by a Capuchin friar into the convent attached to the parish, where he would from that day forward be raped on a weekly basis for 4 years. His book details not only the tragic suffering that he endured, but also the long path he has taken to forgiveness, culminating in the civil and ecclesiastical recognition of his abuser's crimes.
Ecclesiastical. Yeah.
It's
called Forgive Me, Father?
Yeah.
What's it called again?
It's called I Forgive You, Father, Surviving a Broken Childhood. So don't you think he was probably paid? Do you think he was probably paid?
No, but here's the whole thing of forgiveness. Why would the victim have to forgive the father who did it? Okay, drop the word father, okay? That's the title. When you're raped by somebody, we're attacked and assaulted. What does forgiveness have to do with anything? And why is it so important? You find this among secular counselors all the time. They say, "Oh, it's so important you forgive." I always ask myself why. Why is that the case? Because when the individuals I've worked with in the healing circles, the ones who seem to have their life together the best and were strongest and able to speak are the ones who hadn't forgiven, who said, "No, I'm not going to just look the other way. I'm not going to somehow pretend I'm better and I'm morally elevated by forgiving somebody." And that isn't even what the word forgiveness means in the Bible. Forgiveness, when Jesus uses it, means to not be like your enemy, to turn around and walk in a different way. So by forgiveness, we're saying just don't have any more thing to do with that. You don't have to crawl on your knees and beg, forgiveness from or issue forgiveness to your abuser. That's not at all on. And I think the very fact that it's framed in that way in that document shows it's another way to keep people subordinate, which doesn't mean in a reconciliation. It's to resubordinate somebody. It has to do with the slave mentality, and the reason I'm saying all that is because the church rests on subordination of the human race to one man, which in itself is a demonic concept. Mm-hmm. There's one authority. If people want to think in terms of subjugation or being under authority, we're under the authority of God in heaven, not a human being. Okay, and tyrants rest on that idea that the human race has to be subordinate to individuals. So I'm saying all that because behind all these different news items and everything, there's one basic idea. They are a legitimate authority and they can do whatever they want to their own people. They can rape children and get away with it. They can put people in Vatican prisons. They can do whatever they want. And then when they drop a few crumbs, people are supposed to applaud them and say, "Oh, isn't it great they're changing?" The whole thing has to be gotten rid of because it's based on a false, really blasphemous idea. Am I preaching?
No, I think what I'm thinking in response to what you've said is this just seems to be, how do I say this? They're on the defense, on the defense.
Very much.
The articles are starting to reveal more and more, Kevin, that they're having to put out a lot more fires. And it just seems to me that sooner or later, it's all going to catch up with them. I do want to make an announcement that, are you familiar with Sasha Stone?
No.
Okay. Many people out there, you've probably seen, I've put a couple blog posts up from the past when Sasha Stone did an absolutely articulate job on discussing our natural sovereignty of the world. And now he has gone so far as to take this even a step further. It's called the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. And
ITNJ, yeah, I've heard about that.
And what they're going to be doing, they've actually asked me to be on the one of the councils. And what they're going to be doing is they have worked to put together a panel of judges. And in a way, it's kind of like, you know, the Nuremberg trials, where they're actually going to bring all of this stuff to an international forefront so that there can be no dispute, there can be no denial, and they'll be able to bring all the details forward in, you know, who's participated, what did they do, what crimes to humanity have they, you know, performed, and to actually sentence them. Now, they're not, it's, you know, as you said, they're above the law and that kind of thing, but it's really similar to what you've been kind of preaching all along, which is we've got to start working within the common law, you know, and take
right.
our power.
And the key now, like we have the proof, we have the evidence, it's been proved time and again. The question is, what do you enforce it with? How do you stop the crime?
Right.
And what you're saying is all the necessary first step, but now, again, the question at the end of that will be, what do we do with this verdict? And how do we act on the sentence that a court like that would bring in? Don't forget, any sentence out of that kind of tribunal can be acted upon by any court in the world. There can be arrest warrants issued. Police can be ordered to detain people in that. So it's very valuable putting together that body of evidence, right? Yeah. The focus of what I do now with people is training them, doing training programs so that they know how to not only set up such courts, but train community sheriffs into making the arrests in the communities. And I think with, you know, we talked earlier about people acting in groups, start in your community. Otherwise it gets kind of too big, too overwhelming. There are things, these things going on against children are happening right in our own neighborhoods. We've got to act and start there. So I would think that that's, you know, the one outlet of the kind of thing you're talking about, for sure.
Yeah. And hey, we all need to start somewhere. Everyone knows this is just a very big passion of mine, especially because honestly, I just saw so much pedophilia in the past lives, I should say childhoods, of so many of my clients. And it, you know, I started saying to myself, my God, what is this all about? And that's kind of what led me to having conversation with you and so on and so forth. So, but, you know, is there anything else that you have to share with us? I mean, before you even dive into that, can you please clarify for everyone, how does one become a saint?
I guess it depends how you define the term. How do you mean it? How do you mean saint?
Peter, Saint Ignatius.
Oh, you mean in their tradition of the saints?
Saint Michael. Within the Catholic
Church. Easily. Within the Catholic Church, how you become one is you do something that's profited the Vatican, either politically or financially, that makes you a saint. Like, for example, Thomas More, who was the Chancellor of England, defended the Catholic Church against King Henry. He went around burning heretics. Anyone who printed a Bible, he'd get hauled into a private prison by Thomas More. Thomas More eventually had his head chopped off, and that made him a saint because he was a symbol of the Vatican fighting the attempt by the Crown of England to take control of the Church of England, which eventually happened. That's why we've got the Anglican Church, right? So anyone who serves the direct interests of the Vatican becomes a saint. It basically comes down to that.
And is there such
realistically, I mean,
Is there such a thing as an entitlement or a title of saint outside the Catholic Church?
Well, that idea that, yeah, I mean, you find a similar thing in the Orthodox Church, Greek Orthodox Church. They have saints, and what the idea is that they believe that they've gone up the spiritual hierarchy, if you like, that they're closer to God because of some pious act or because of who they were. It has a much more political term in the Roman context, you know, but I reject the whole idea of it because I don't believe in spiritual hierarchies. So I think you're asking the wrong person.
No. I actually was just about to say, if you're a completely enlightened master, you wouldn't need the name saint, you know.
That's the way I put it, yeah.
I was also going to ask you about, what is your take, because you're so knowledgeable in this area, what is your take between Saint Michael and the slaying of the dragon? Why is that all over the place in all these churches? What was the ultimate deal?
I don't know. I can't tell you why it's so common.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Mr.
No, I mean, I've read different things about it. No, but St. Michael and St. Gabriel, the two main kind of spiritual guardians, you know, of the church. But I don't know why that per se is used. I mean, you see that in, especially in England with Anglo-Saxon background, St. George slaying the dragon in England. The dragon, of course, being traditionally associated with non-Catholic, quote, pagan traditions, like the serpent in the Bible, when in fact the serpent was a symbol of wisdom. It's got perverted and turned into a bad thing. So it could be a symbol of, quote, paganism that they attempt to co-opt. I mean, it's all about energy vampirism. You know that, right?
Sure.
Taking the energy of a conquered people, you take their skull or an image of their culture and you make it into your own. That's why the English aristocracy adopted the kilt when they conquered the Scottish Highlands. Goes on and on. In the Vancouver police, they all have an Aboriginal art on the side of the car, the police car. You're taking the image and the spirit of a conquered people and possessing it. And it probably has something to do with that, etherically, but I don't know. I wish I could come up with more, search my brain more about what I know about St. Michael, but nothing's coming to me at the moment.
Well, and I read that St. Michael, he became a hero and he saved this damsel in distress because the dragon was going to come and kill her and eat her. But I've also read elsewhere that a lot of times this is depicted when, how did they say it? It's depicted, they're slaying of the dragon when they want to really make a name for themselves as a knight. Then they'll go out and slay a dragon, and they talked about how it was related to paganism. So
right. Well, that's all those animal images always are. I mean, it's the same old basic idea that do you remember that what's that movie that came out? But they go to another planet and they Avatar. Do you remember that movie Avatar?
Great movie, yeah.
And the Vatican interdicted that film. That means no Catholic was allowed to go and see it. Why? Well, because they said it worshiped nature. It says God is in nature, which is a no-no idea in the Catholic.
Know that.
Belief, right? But in fact, what the film was showing was Earth people come and they want the resources of this planet, and there's an indigenous population that they've got to wipe out. And they're these tall, beautiful people, right? And so what they do is they get a genetically created creature that looks like them, and they put the consciousness of a human being into it to infiltrate their people, right? To take them over and subvert them, to get them off their land so they can then go and get this rare mineral that is going to make billions of dollars for this corporation that's assaulting their planet. Yeah. Well, that's exactly what the Vatican did over the centuries on Earth. They go in, they infiltrate the people. That's what residential school's about. That's what the Jesuits did. They convert some of the local chiefs and they use them to wipe out the rest of the indigenous people. So by them, it's like what I said, by their reaction, you can see their nature. The Vatican's saying, we don't want people learning about that because it'll expose who we are. It'll expose that we have used those methods over centuries to infiltrate the human race, to subvert it, so we can make a lot of money off you guys. And that's essentially what the Vatican is. It's a big money-sucking corporation. And they need you need people stupid and fooled and afraid in order to suck them dry. And that's what they've done for centuries, and that's why they don't want anyone watching that film and putting two and two together. So,
you know, Tory Smith used to remote view. He started out trying to stop the actual rituals from taking place, and that didn't happen. He just didn't have enough ability to stop on an etheric level. So then he decided that he would remote view and then try and assist the souls of the children so that so that they could, you know, pass over and get out of what I think is really the definition of purgatory, right? I think that's what they really mean by purgatory, because what they're doing is they're like you said, they're capturing the essence, they're capturing the soul of the child when they kill them, and then they hold them somehow. He says they literally contain them in their own auric field.
Yeah, like they're feeding off their
it was really
their energy, their spiritual, they're feeding off their substance, and that's on the surface. Like there's two aspects to anything, right? The apparent and the actual. And the appearance of the Vatican is it's money-sucking corporation, which it is in the world. But behind it, it's energy-sucking. It's about drawing all authority and power and consciousness of everyone unto themselves. That's why they're the oldest corporation on the planet, you know, because that's what a corporation does. It subordinates everything human to its own maintenance, and that's what we're facing. So you only respond to that by taking back your power. That's the essence of common law, is to recognize it all resides within us anyway. It's unalienable, inherent. We just take it back and exercise it. And the fact, you know, people often say, well, how could just a few of you bring about these changes, like in Canada about the genocide and that? It's because a few of us discovered that when you act in that power, you shake their whole system. You can literally feel it shaking when you're withdrawing even a particle of your energy from it. Mm-hmm. And the more of us who do it, you know, you reach a critical mass and it collapses, not because we've attacked it, but because we've withdrawn from it. And that's the best kind of it. Like Sun Tzu says in The Art of War, it's about maneuver. It is not about assault. It's about getting your enemy to destroy themselves by your right maneuver, rather than having to take on a much bigger formidable enemy and defeat them, which you can't on their terms, right?
Right.
So,
well, and you don't want to create more resistance. You know, the saying, if you resist, it persists. Well, you don't want to go there, and you don't even want to feed them energetically, because I mean they're very smooth in getting world meditations together, world prayer days together, and if these are scheduled days, they know exactly how to extract energy from that group of people.
Right.
They do. This is why I don't post.
Well, that's why you ignore.
I don't, Kevin, I don't post anything that's like a world, anything scheduled event, prayer or meditation, because I already know how the energy is going to be used. You know?
I wanted to, that's right. And I wanted to, because it says my internet connection is failing. I hope we're not cut off, but if we are, I just wanted to make a little plug. The people probably know my websites, but murderbydecree.com has a lot of the links on it, and of course itccs.org. But a lot of the focus we're doing these days is on that practical arming of people, and I don't mean just in this world, but spiritually as well. To recovering that sovereignty, that personal sovereignty, and from there the community sovereignty. We had a good couple of people on our RadioFreeKanata show last month who were establishing. They're from Pennsylvania, and they're taking back local power with what's called a home rule charter, where their township in Western Pennsylvania has declared that to fight the fracking company that's trying to get into their watershed, they have nullified a Pennsylvania court order allowing the fracking to happen. And they're saying, no, we're taking back, and they can do that under the U.S. Constitution. A municipality can take back their authority and say, we have the ultimate power under the Constitution and self-governance, which is what America was based on, people governing themselves with covenants rather than the government doing. Government's a fiction. We create government, we create the law, right? And so they've done this in Grant Township, Pennsylvania, and they've even made it, they're the first community in America to allow citizens to act with civil disobedience and not be prosecuted for it. So it's making civil disobedience lawful. And they're in this tough fight now. I'm going to have them back on the show again soon, but
fascinating.
But that's the kind of thing that people can do locally, not just individual action, but as a community. These 750 people are defying big corporations and the state government with this self-determination. So I think that's really encouraging. That's the kind of thing we need to be doing. Also, a friend of mine listening to our interview said, go to the website whatdoesitmean.com, because that was relevant to some stuff we were talking earlier.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
Whatdoesitmean.com.
Yeah.
Check it out. That'll be affiliated with some of the questions we've asked. Right on. Yep. Well, thank you, Kevin, as usual. You're
welcome.
Are you going to be traveling, or can you talk about it, or you going to be talking anywhere?
I can't talk about that right now.
Yeah. I kind of knew that.
Yeah. But we need to be hopeful because of all these changes happen, but we have to recognize where that's coming from. It's only happening because we took action. I mean the people. And there's an old saying, put not your trust in princes. Like, I don't trust anyone in power, because it's like in the Vatican, there's different factions and they're using this stuff and they're just as much a part of the problem. We are our own best protectors. The people under God are the source of all authority. So that's what we need to be hammering home. It's like people have to rediscover freedom. And that's what we're all about. So that's a lot of the focus. And
good.
You can write to me, hiddenformhistory1@gmail.com is my email.
Yeah. And let me see. I was going to say, never mind. Anyway. Well, anyway.
What were you going to say?
Well, it was just a thought I had about what you said, but it was like a while ago. So anyway, thank you for your work. Thank you for your work. And, a lot of people were kind of wondering, because you've been kind of quiet. The people that asked me, Kevin, where's Kevin? So now we know that.
Well, and also I spent last year writing those 4 books, which you can see Amazon.com. Just put my name in, see all of them. Especially Murder by Decree. That's the one that summed up a lot of the work.
A lot of work.
And have you read Unrelenting?
I did.
Unrelenting as well. That's my biographical account. Yes. All right.
I did an interview.
Good. Well, thank you for
2 books.
Oh yeah, all right. Time flies.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Alexandra. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for renewing the content.
You're welcome. So don't forget, everyone, you can check out his website at itccs.org. And of course, continue to check out our blog 365 days a year, and that's galacticconnection.com. And just continue to check us out. We've got a lot of new things going on, lots of new products and services, and we've got some cool healers that have come on board to work in alliance with GC. And as always, just hoping that we can shed more light on this incredible, pervasive virus, and that is to eradicate once and for all child sacrifice and satanic ritual and human trafficking. So God bless, lots of love to everyone out there, and you take it easy. Everyone have a great day.